It started with the executives. Men in black suits appearing all over the country, handing out golden invitations to the strongest fighters they could find. The prize? Any wish granted. They tracked down Ryu while he was buying groceries. A kid with zero measurable mana, but with physical martial arts so absurd they defied logic. On the day of the preliminaries, Ryu got distracted. A thief snatched a woman's purse, and Ryu gave chase on his bicycle, somehow keeping up with a speeding motorcycle. The chase ended abruptly at an intersection. Jax, a brawler heading to the tournament to pay off a massive debt, stopped the speeding motorcycle dead with a single punch. Before the thief could run, Senna dropped in. A swordswoman fighting to restore her family's dojo, she trapped the thief perfectly. The trio had met. Together, they arrived at the Zenith Tournament preliminaries. Not a magical forest, but a massive, modern indoor stadium packed with thousands of awakened fighters and martial artists. The preliminary measurement sorted the weak from the strong. Jax shattered the average immediately, his raw physical power clocking in at 8,500 points. Senna stepped up next. With a single, precise strike of her wooden sword, the meter spiked to 9,200. The crowd gasped. Then came Ryu. He lazily tapped the machine. Because he had zero magic, the system couldn't read his physical density. It flashed a humiliating 0. The other fighters laughed, writing him off as a complete joke. But the laughing didn't last long. The executive in the black suit stepped up to the microphone. The rules for the preliminary are simple, he announced. A total free-for-all. Only the last 100 standing pass. The buzzer sounded, and the stadium descended into absolute chaos. Alliances broke instantly. It was a massive, brutal battle royale. 3 large street thugs immediately targeted Ryu. "Sorry kid, but the 0-point guy goes out first," the leader sneered. They threw their punches simultaneously. Ryu didn't block. He just leaned back, swaying like a leaf in the wind. They missed by exactly 1 millimeter. Without taking his hands out of his hoodie pockets, Ryu delivered a flawless renewal taekwondo roundhouse kick. The physical shockwave blasted all 3 thugs across the arena. While Ryu napped through his first fight, the rest of the stadium was an absolute meat grinder. Jax moved like a demolition derby, clearing entire waves of contestants with raw, unscientific street boxing. He didn't use flash magic or weapon arrays. He relied on pure, suffocating kinetic force, driven by a desperate need to survive and secure the prize money. On the opposite side of the arena, Senna was a masterclass in efficiency. Using her family's forgotten moonlight sword style, she dismantled weapon-wielding hunters without shedding a single drop of blood. To her, this tournament wasn't a playground, it was a blood debt. Every strike brought her one step closer to restoring her family's ruined legacy. Up in the observation deck, Floor 1 Administrator cross-monitored the chaos. Amidst thousands of flashy magic users, 3 pure physical fighters were completely breaking the statistics. Suddenly, the buzzer rang. The arena floor tore apart, revealing the true nature of the Spire. The flat arena was gone, the vertical climb had officially begun. The preliminary brawl is over. Cross's voice echoed from above. Welcome to the Spire Ascent. The gate to floor 2 closes in 10 minutes at the top of the stairs. But the Spire encourages gatekeeping. Waiting on the 50th landing was Taegun, a high-ranking seed from the northern regions who intended to cull the herd himself. Wielding brutal Kyokushin karate, Taegun's raw physical kicks created a pressurized gale that swept descending fighters off the steps like dead leaves. When the core trio finally reached his landing, Taegun stopped them. He pointed his fingerless glove directly at Ryu, laughing at the 0-point counter floating above the sleepy kid's head. A 0-point bug got this far? Taegun sneered, his cocky grin twisting into an expression of profound irritation. This tower has completely lost its standards. Without warning, Tae-gun lashed out with a lethal straight punch. But Jax wasn't the average competitor. He crossed his forearms, absorbing the heavy blow with a resounding crack. Before Tae-gun could pull his fist back, Senna moved. Her wooden sword cleared its sheath in a microsecond, delivering a flawless sidestrike that rattled the gatekeeper's ribs. Tae-gun skidded back across the stone landing, coughing. With a sadistic smile, he slammed a panic button on his wrist. A massive digital security wall slammed down across the stairs right behind him, locking the trio out. With the timer ticking down and a digital energy wall blocking the path to floor 2, Ryu finally stepped forward. He pulled his headphones over his ears, closed his eyes to the world, and cracked his knuckles. It was time to show them how Renewal Taekwondo handles a wall. Blocked by the Spire's digital security gate, Ryu didn't look for a control panel. He just pulled his headphones up over his ears, closed his eyes, and tuned out the noise. Using a flawless Renewal Taekwondo twisting kick, he struck the dead center of the gate's mana flow. The impenetrable digital iron shattered into a million glowing pieces. Tae-gun, enraged and humiliated that a 0-point bug broke the gate, lunged at Ryu's blind spot intending to execute a lethal strike to the back of his neck. The strike never landed. Jax stepped in, his white dress shirt fluttering. With a perfectly calm, intense glare, the handsome brawler caught the S-rank strike with one taped hand. "Don't interrupt his song," Jax said coldly. He pivoted, driving a textbook, devastating straight right punch directly into the gatekeeper's chest. The kinetic force bypassed Tae-gun's physical defenses completely, knocking him out cold. Jax casually adjusted his collar, his breathing perfectly steady. Senna walked past him through the shattered gate, a faint, impressed smile on her face. "Not bad form," she noted. Jax just nodded. With the gatekeeper crushed and the path cleared, the trio stepped through the threshold. The dark stone stairwell vanished, replaced by the blinding light of floor 2. They didn't step into another arena. Floor 2 was a massive, decaying modern cityscape, entirely submerged under knee-deep, glowing blue water. The sunken city. Administrator Cross's voice echoed across the water via a massive sky hologram. "Welcome to Floor 2. The objective is simple: survive the ecosystem for 3 hours." Hundreds of other fighters who had made it up the stairs were already scattered across the flooded streets, splashing nervously, waiting for the hidden trap. They didn't have to wait long. The water violently erupted as a colossal, armored mechanical sea serpent tore through the submerged asphalt. Panic consumed the other competitors. Mages fired spells that bounced harmlessly off the beast's armor. Ryu, meanwhile, leaned against a rusty street lamp and yawned. Jax simply rolled the sleeves of his white shirt a little higher. Senna drew her wooden sword, her eyes locked onto the colossal machine's joints. The other fighters ran for their lives. But the trio just stood there in the glowing water. A 3-hour survival test was boring. They were just going to break the ecosystem instead. Jax moved first. Launching himself off a submerged car, he delivered a crushing right hook directly to the serpent's steel jaw. The impact echoed like a cannon blast, denting the heavy armor. Senna followed instantly, stepping lightly across the water's surface. Her moonlight sword style was so fast the wooden blade sparked against the steel, slicing through the beast's secondary optical sensors. Furious, the boss monster ignored them. It locked its primary targeting system onto the anomaly standing by the street lamp. The beast swung its colossal, spiked steel tail to crush Ryu into paste. The impact was apocalyptic. The tail didn't just hit Ryu, it sheared entirely through the decaying skyscraper behind him, burying the 0-point fighter under thousands of tons of concrete and steel. High above, Administrator Cross smirked. "A shame," he muttered. "I thought the anomaly might actually be interesting. But flesh and blood has its limits." Jax and Senna stopped fighting, staring at the collapsed building. The other competitors laughed nervously, relieved the monster had taken out the trash. And then, the rubble shifted. Ryu stepped out of the dust, brushing concrete off his shoulder. He wasn't bleeding. He didn't even look bruised. He just looked annoyed. He pressed 2 fingers against an acupressure point on his neck. My grandfather told me never to take off the physical limiters unless it was an emergency, Ryu whispered. The water around his feet instantly vaporized into steam from the sheer, suffocating heat of his accelerating blood flow. When he opened his eyes, the sleepy, lazy kid was gone. The raw kinetic pressure radiating from him was so heavy it physically pushed the knee-deep water away from him in a perfect circle. He didn't use mana. He didn't summon a magic circle. He simply planted his foot and initiated a pure, recoilless renewal taekwondo roundhouse. His foot connected with the center of the colossal machine. For a fraction of a second, there was absolute silence as the laws of physics tried to process the kinetic output. Then, the air shattered. The atmospheric pressure from the kick was so devastating it parted the entire flooded city, carving a dry trench through the ocean for a mile straight. The S-rank mechanical boss didn't just break, it was cleanly bisected. The massive upper half of the serpent was sent flying into the sky, raining scrap metal and oil across the ruins. Ryu casually lowered his leg and pulled his sleeping mask back onto his forehead, immediately returning to his slouched, sleepy posture. Jax and Senna just stared at him in absolute silence. Up in the sky, Cross was pale, completely frozen in horror. The Spire's central system tracker violently glitched, numbers spinning into the millions before the screen completely shattered, displaying a fatal error. Back in the Spire control room, absolute panic erupted. Floor 2's ecosystem wasn't just beaten, it was eradicated. The automated point tracking system completely fried trying to calculate Ryu's kinetic output. The panic died instantly when the doors slid open. Executive Vane, one of the Spire's elite 6 judges, stepped in. His mere presence suffocated the room. "Relax," he said around his lollipop. "I'll handle the bug." Down on floor 2, the remaining competitors were frozen in fear of Ryu. Except for one. A kid named Miho, wearing a yellow cardigan, calmly walked up to the edge of the massive trench Ryu had carved. "Fascinating," Miho muttered, showing a tablet full of physics equations to Jax and Senna. It wasn't magic. He forced the water apart purely through atmospheric friction and recoil compression. His tendons must be made of titanium. Miho wasn't the only one watching. High above on a ruined skyscraper, Kira, the tournament's top-seeded prodigy, looked down with a crazed smile. He had finally found prey worth hunting. Before Kira could jump down, the sky violently darkened. The atmosphere instantly became so heavy that hundreds of surviving fighters were crushed to their knees, gasping for oxygen. Executive Vane dropped from the sky, landing gently on the surface of the water. He didn't use a spell to float, the water's surface tension was literally too terrified to break under his weight. As Vane walked forward, the water parted around his ankles purely from the sheer weight of his aura. Ryu's lazy expression finally dropped. Every instinct in his body screamed danger. Vane stopped 10 feet away. He pulled the lollipop from his mouth and pointed the candy at Ryu. "You broke my ecosystem, kid. Now I have to do paperwork." Ryu didn't wait. Moving faster than the speed of sound, he closed the gap, launching a full-power, limiter-released flying knee directly at the executive's head. The impact caused a localized earthquake. But when the dust cleared, the entire stadium went dead silent. Executive Vane had stopped Ryu's ultimate strike with a single index finger. Vane sighed. He casually flicked his finger. The kinetic feedback was so overwhelming it blasted Ryu backward, sending the invincible prodigy skipping across the water like a thrown stone. Ryu crashed to a halt, coughing up a drop of blood. It was the first time he had taken damage in years. But instead of fear, a massive, manic smile spread across his face. There was a ceiling to break. Jax, Senna, and the tactician Miho watched in stunned silence. The absolute power gap between the contestants and the tournament executives was unfathomable. Vayne put the lollipop back in his mouth and snapped his fingers. A massive golden portal tore open the sky. "Congratulations on clearing floor 2, kids," Vayne mocked. "Try not to die on floor 3. They stepped through Executive Vayne's portal, expecting another hellish death trap. Instead, the blinding golden light faded into the glow of a million neon signs. "Welcome to floor 3, the Neon Bazaar." A massive, thriving modern metropolis built entirely inside the spire. This was a safe zone, a residential hub where surviving fighters lived, traded, and recovered. Ryu leaned against an alleyway wall, finally feeling the bruised ribs from Vayne's casual flick. For the first time, the trio realized this wasn't just a tournament, it was an entire enclosed society. "You're going to need a guide," a voice said. Miho, the tactician from the sunken city, walked into the alleyway, adjusting his thick glasses and holding up a digital map of the floor. "In the bazaar, your combat points are your currency," Miho explained, tapping his tablet. "Food, medical supplies, weapons, everything costs points. And since Ryu here has 0, you guys are broke." Miho tapped a nearby terminal, transferring his own leftover preliminary points to buy a high-grade medical patch. "Let me handle the logistics and the strategy, and I'll keep you 3 alive." With the medical patch applied, Ryu's bruised ribs healed instantly. He stood up, stretching lazily. But the quiet moment was interrupted as the crowd on the main street suddenly parted in fear. Kira, the top-seeded prodigy, strolled down the neon avenue flanked by his own elite squad. Unlike the scrambling rookies, Kira walked like he already owned the spire. Kira stopped directly in front of Ryu's group. He didn't draw a weapon. He just pointed a finger gun at Ryu's head with a crazed smile. Ryu, entirely unimpressed, just yawned and looked away. "You're the 0-point bug who survived Vayne," Kira whispered, his eyes gleaming with battlelust. "Make sure you make it to the main bracket. I want to break you myself." Before a fight could break out in the safe zone, a massive, deafening alarm echoed through the metropolis. Every neon sign and holographic billboard in the city simultaneously hijacked to the Spire broadcast system. Administrator Cross's face appeared on every screen. "Attention, surviving regulars," his voice boomed across the city. "The preliminary sorting is officially concluded. The true Spire ascent begins now. To proceed beyond floor 3, solo climbing is strictly prohibited," Cross announced. "You have 24 hours to register an official 4-man squad. The next floor is a team capture objective. Fail to form a team, and you will be eliminated." Jax and Senna slowly turned their heads, looking directly at the tactician standing next to them. Miho nervously pushed his glasses up. "I told you," Miho smiled. "You need me." And just like that, the anomaly, the brawler, the swordswoman, and the tactician became a squad. The real Zenith Tournament was finally about to begin. 24 hours later, floor 4 opened. Out of the thousands who started, only a few hundred 4-man squads had survived to see the team capture objective. "The rules for floor 4 are simple," Cross announced via the hologram. "Scattered across the canyon are flags. Be the first to secure 3 flags and bring them to the center dial. Everyone else is eliminated." The gates dropped. It wasn't a race, it was a war. Dozens of squads instantly clashed at the choke points, determined to thin the competition before even searching for the flags. This was where Miho proved his worth. While other teams ran blindly into ambushes, the tactician mapped the canyon's terrain algorithms on his tablet, identifying the safest routes. "Jax, clear the vanguard," Miho commanded. Stepping into a southpaw stance, Jax unleashed his signature vacuum corkscrew strike. The rotational force generated a spiraling tornado of compressed air that completely disintegrated the enemy's glowing shield. Senna exploited the opening perfectly. Bounding off the canyon walls, she executed, moonlight style, phantom crescent. Her wooden sword projected a massive, glowing blue aura slash that cleanly severed the brawler's weapons without drawing a single drop of blood. Perfect execution, Miho said, adjusting his glasses. Now we just need, wait. Where did Ryu go? Ryu had completely wandered off. Following his own terrible sense of direction, he had accidentally walked straight into the middle of a massive 12-man alliance holding down the central basin. It's the 0-point kid who broke the ecosystem, one of the rival leaders yelled. Terrified of his reputation, all three squads instantly focused fire, launching a massive coordinated barrage. Ryu didn't even take his hands out of his pockets. The attacks didn't hit him. The ambient kinetic pressure radiating from his resting body simply deflected the barrage like rain hitting an umbrella. With a heavy sigh, Ryu performed a lazy, low-sweeping kick. The resulting circular shockwave blasted the entire 12-man alliance into the canyon walls, eliminating 3 squads in a single second. As Ryu lazily pulled a captured red flag from the rubble, the canyon suddenly lit up with an intense, blinding crimson light from the cliffs above. It was Kira. The top-seeded prodigy wasn't interested in capturing flags. He had abandoned his own team just to hunt down the anomaly. Kira crashed down like a meteor, his fist engulfed in highly compressed plasma. Ryu finally pulled one hand out of his pocket, blocking the strike with his forearm. The resulting clash shattered the entire basin floor. Locked in a dead heat, Kira grinned maniacally. I knew you weren't a fluke, he roared. Ryu's sleepy expression completely vanished, replaced by the terrifying glare of the true Zenith contender. Back in the central basin, the clash was reaching its boiling point. Kira floated above the shattered ground, laughing as he condensed a massive, roaring sphere of hyperlethal red plasma into his hand. Let's see you deflect this, anomaly. Ryu didn't back down. Dropping his lazy posture entirely, he shifted his weight into the ultimate renewal taekwondo stance. The raw, terrifying atmospheric pressure around his feet literally caused the air to crack like glass. Kira dove. Ryu launched upward. A collision that would undoubtedly wipe the entire canyon off the map was only fractions of a second away. But the explosion never came. A colossal, impenetrable green digital barrier violently erupted between them, completely absorbing both of their ultimate strikes. A deafening siren echoed through the entire canyon. Checkmate, a voice echoed over the Spire's global broadcast. Far away at the objective point, Miho pushed his glasses up his nose. 3 glowing red flags were securely plugged into the central dial. Down in the basin, Kira's plasma fizzled out. He looked up at the global broadcast, a dangerous, impressed grin spreading across his face. While Ryu and Kira were playing gods, Miho had used their battle as the ultimate distraction to steal the win. Administrator Cross appeared on the sky monitor, looking genuinely surprised. The required flags have been secured. The team composed of Jax, Senna, Miho, and Ryu has taken first place. All other combat is immediately halted. Kira turned his back, slipping his hands into his pockets. He looked over his shoulder at Ryu. You got lucky today, anomaly. But the next bracket is strictly one-on-one. Don't you dare lose before you reach me. Before Ryu could answer, massive pillars of golden light crashed down from the sky, engulfing the winning squads. The team capture phase was officially over. The golden light faded. They weren't in a ruined city or a dark canyon anymore. They had been teleported to the Zenith lobby, a hyper-luxurious penthouse waiting area high above the clouds. Only 32 fighters had survived the preliminary culling to reach this room. Miho wiped the dust off his glasses. Jax rolled down his sleeves. Ryu just stretched, looking for a couch to sleep on. Suddenly, a massive holographic projection materialized in the center of the room. A perfectly structured, 32-man tournament bracket. The team games were over. The system automatically sorted the matchups based on combat data. The room went silent as the first round was locked in. Block A, Match 1, Jax vs the recovered Northern Tiger, Taegun. Taegun, fully healed by the Spire's medical staff, stepped out of the crowd. He cracked his neck, his eyes burning with a desperate need for revenge. Jax met his glare with absolute, icy calm. The tension in the room was suffocating. The Elite 32 were ready to tear each other apart for the ultimate wish. Meanwhile, Ryu had found a leather couch and was already fast asleep. The team games were over. The Spire's central system sorted the top 32 survivors into the apex brackets. The first match was a grudge match, Jax vs the recovered Northern Tiger, Taegun. They were teleported to the apex arena. Taegun had discarded his GI, revealing glowing red tiger tattoos, a forbidden stimulant to match Jax's raw physical output. Taegun didn't waste time. He unleashed Northern Style, Frenzy, moving so fast he created 3 physical afterimages, striking Jax from all sides simultaneously. But Jax wasn't just a brawler. Using Iron Pulse, Kinetic Calculus, he read the air pressure of the afterimages. He dodged the lethal strikes by exactly 0.01 seconds, his pulse never rising. "My turn," Jax whispered. He unleashed Iron Pulse, Singularity. The rotational force was so immense it didn't just hit Taegun, it shattered his mana-enhanced tattoos and sent him flying across the arena. Taegun was out before he hit the ground. Jax casually adjusted his cuffs, his shirt still perfectly crisp. The crowd sat in stunned silence. The commoner had just dismantled a regional seed with 15% effort. Match 2, Senna vs the Iron Phalanx. Unwilling to fight a 1v1, the Phalanx invoked a challenge clause, bringing 12 elite guards to the stage to overwhelm the swordswoman. Senna didn't even take a breath. She executed Stellar Edge, Thousand Petal Dance. She moved so fast she appeared in 12 places at once, her wooden sword shattering their tactical armor into dust. The chills hit the stadium. In 3 seconds, Senna had neutralized an entire elite squad without a single lethal wound. The Stellar Edge arts had returned to the world. In the VIP box, Executive Vane leaned forward, his red lollipop cracking between his teeth. He wasn't bored anymore. These commoners were breaking his Spire's logic. But deeper in the Spire, a darker power was watching. Pontiff Malachor, leader of the Spire cult, stared at Ryu's sleeping face on the monitors. He didn't see a student. He saw a vessel. For the final match of the first round, the arena itself changed. The floor turned to liquid ink, and from the depths, Mirror Shadow emerged, a perfect digital copy of Ryu. The crowd gasped. The Mirror Shadow had Ryu's stats, his speed, and his renewal taekwondo. It was a battle against his own perfection. They moved in perfect synchronization. Every strike Ryu threw, the shadow countered with the exact same velocity. The arena began to crack under the repetitive, identical shockwaves. Ryu's manic smile returned. "You're good," he whispered to his own reflection. They both reached for their neck limiters at the same time. The real fight was just beginning. Deep in the Spire's restricted sectors, Pontiff Malachor watched the fight. He had hijacked the arena's system. This wasn't a test to see if Ryu could win, it was an extraction. In the arena, Ryu and the Shadow clashed again. But Ryu noticed something terrifying. The Shadow wasn't just copying his moves, it was perfectly anticipating them. Up in the stands, Miho's tablet flashed red. "It's a siphon." Miho yelled. "The Shadow isn't mirroring his power, it's actively draining his kinetic memory." Ryu stumbled. His vision flickered. Every time their fists collided, a piece of his muscle memory was ripped away and uploaded into the Spire's database. Jax didn't wait for the referee. Realizing the game was rigged, he leaped over the spectator railing, his arm roaring with the compressed air of an iron pulse. Senna moved with him. Drawing her wooden blade, she unleashed Stellar Edge, nebula flash, a blinding crescent of pure aura aimed directly at the arena's containment field. Their combined strikes hit the containment field with the force of a meteor. The hijacked digital barrier couldn't withstand the raw kinetic output of the two anomalies, shattering into glowing green dust. The moment the barrier broke, the uplink was severed. The kinetic drain stopped instantly. Ryu stood up, looking at his hands. The sluggish, draining feeling was gone. Ryu looked at the mirror shadow. It had copied his posture, his speed, and his techniques flawlessly. So, Ryu did the one thing a computer couldn't predict. He dropped his guard completely. He didn't use renewal taekwondo. He didn't use any technique at all. He threw a raw, messy, unrefined street punch fueled purely by anger. The Spire's algorithm couldn't calculate an attack that had no logic or form. The raw punch connected perfectly. The shadow's face shattered like a broken television screen. The digital copy couldn't process the error. It completely destabilized, dissolving back into a puddle of black ink and static. Ryu rubbed his knuckles. Sometimes, pure violence beats math. Jax and Senna landed on the arena floor beside him. They had completely broken the tournament rules by interfering, but none of them cared. They glared up at the VIP box. In the dark control room, Pontiff Malachar watched his screens go black. He wasn't angry. He touched his golden mask, letting out a sinister chuckle. The anomaly was stronger than he thought. But breaking the rules has consequences. Thousands of heavily armed Spire security guards swarmed the arena, aiming their rifles at the trio. The tournament was officially suspended. They were now enemies of the Spire. The tournament was officially suspended. Surrounded by thousands of heavily armed Spire guards, the squad had crossed the line from competitors to criminals. "Open fire," the guard captain ordered. Thousands of lethal blue lasers rained down. But Ryu simply slammed his foot into the floor, generating a dome of atmospheric pressure that deflected the entire volley into the ceiling. "Hold the dome for 10 seconds. Miho yelled over the explosions. The tactician had plugged his tablet directly into the arena's shattered hardline. "I'm initiating an emergency floor flush." Miho bypassed the Spire's security matrix. The arena floor violently gave way beneath them, dropping the four-man squad into the massive, dark maintenance shafts of the tower. They didn't land on another tournament floor. They fell into the Underspire, the unregulated, lawless slums where the Spire's black market thrived, and the desperate lived in permanent shadow. Before they could even dust themselves off, they were surrounded by the Iron Bank Syndicate, the ruthless mafia that ran the slums. But Jax didn't draw a weapon. He stepped to the front. Jax's handsome face darkened. This was his home turf. The staggering 8,500 points he scored weren't for glory, they were to pay off a blood debt. The syndicate had purchased the deed to his entire home district. If Jax didn't win the tournament's grand prize, thousands of innocent people from his neighborhood would be enslaved by the syndicate. A massive, 8-foot-tall cyborg enforcer stepped forward, recognizing him. "Look who came back to the gutter," the cyborg sneered. "The tournament boy." Without another word, the enforcer launched a lethal hydraulic punch straight at Jax's head. Senna reached for her sword, but Ryu stopped her. This was Jax's fight. Jax seamlessly slipped the metal fist by an inch and countered with a textbook, devastating left uppercut. The Iron Pulse technique completely bypassed the enforcer's heavy armor. The kinetic force lifted the 8-foot giant off the ground, blasting him violently through a scrap metal wall. Jax slowly unwrapped the tape from his knuckles. He didn't say a word, but his icy glare was enough. The remaining dozen thugs dropped their weapons, trembling in absolute fear. Ryu walked up, casually resting a hand on Jax's shoulder. "You owe these guys money?" Ryu asked lazily. He pointed up toward the syndicate's massive, fortified purple tower in the center of the slums. Jax looked at the tower, then back at his new squad. A genuine smile broke across his face. Yeah, Jack said. A lot. Cool, Ryu replied. Let's go cancel the debt. They weren't just running from the Spire guards anymore. The four-man squad marched directly toward the syndicate headquarters. The Under-Spire was about to get a new management team. The syndicate tower was an impenetrable fortress of black steel and purple neon, built to keep the desperate out and the wealth in. But the squad wasn't planning on knocking. Give me 30 seconds, Miho said, jacking his tablet directly into the mainframe. The syndicate uses brute force encryption. It's expensive, but mathematically predictable. The heavy gates hissed open, but the red carpet wasn't rolled out. Blocking the entrance were the Cyber Ronin, the syndicate's personal elite guard, wielding plasma-edged katanas. Jax rolled his shoulders, ready to brawl, but Senna stepped in front of him, drawing her battered wooden blade. Swordsmen belong to me, she said coldly. Save your energy for the boss, Jax. The Ronin charged, their plasma blades designed to cut through solid steel. But Senna's stellar edge wasn't physical. Her wooden sword resonated with pure aura, clashing against the plasma with blinding sparks. Every swing she took carried the weight of her ruined family dojo. These mercenaries used swords as tools of oppression, she used hers to reclaim her stolen honor. In a flurry of blue light, it was over. The plasma katanas were shattered, and the elite guards lay unconscious. Jax walked past her, giving a silent nod of respect. The path was clear. They rode the elevator straight to the top. The penthouse was a gaudy monument to stolen wealth. Sitting behind the glass desk was Boss Vex, the man who owned half the Under-Spire. You can't be here. Vex stammered, pulling up a glowing red holographic contract. Jax. Your district owes me 5 million points. You attack me, the Spire executes your whole neighborhood. Jax didn't negotiate. He slammed his fist down with a fraction of his iron pulse, completely shattering the massive glass desk and the holographic projector into thousands of pieces. Contract cancelled, Jax stated coldly. Panicking, Vex scrambled across the floor and slammed a hidden red emergency switch on the wall. The back wall of the penthouse violently slid open. Vex didn't just have guards, he had an illegal, genetically modified S-rank chimera hidden in his vault as a last resort. The hulking beast roared, lunging forward to tear them apart. But Ryu finally stepped up. He let out a massive yawn, scratching his stomach lazily. Without even taking his hands out of his pockets, Ryu delivered a casual high kick. The atmospheric shockwave was so absolute it blasted the S-rank monster entirely out of the reinforced penthouse window. The room went dead silent, save for the wind howling through the broken window. Weeping, Boss Vex surrendered the master drive containing all of the district's deeds. Jax's neighborhood was finally free. While Jax secured the deeds to his neighborhood, Miho decrypted the rest of Boss Vex's master drive. Guys, look at this, Miho said. Vex had a VIP pass to the Grand Under-Spire auction tonight. Miho swiped to the auction catalog. Senna's breath hitched. There, listed as the grand finale item, was the Crescent Relic, the legendary, stolen ancestral sword of her ruined family dojo. The grand auction was a gathering of the Spire's most corrupt elites. Warlords, black market dealers, and nobles who thought their massive pools of combat points allowed them to buy anything, even history. The squad didn't bother finding VIP disguises. They kicked the front doors wide open and walked straight down the center aisle, completely ignoring the gasps of the heavily guarded elites. On the stage stood Baron Silas, a smug noble who had just purchased the blade. He was holding the Crescent Relic, a flawless, glowing blue katana that radiated an intense, misty aura. Senna didn't say a word. She leaped onto the grand stage, drawing her battered, taped wooden sword and pointing it directly at the Baron's throat. Her family's honor was not for sale. You want it, gutter trash. Silas laughed, swinging the legendary sword with absolutely no technique. Because the sword was a magical relic, it unleashed a massive, chaotic wave of raw blue energy. But power without form is useless. Executing Stellar Edge, Lunar Eclipse, Senna swung her wooden stick with such absolute, perfected precision that she parried the raw magical wave, splitting it harmlessly in half. Silas screamed for his bodyguards. While Jax and Miho intercepted the heavily armed guards in the aisles, Ryu had found a VIP booth and was happily eating a stolen plate of expensive caviar. The Baron swung again, leaving his guard completely wide open. Senna stepped inside his reach. With a sharp, non-lethal strike to his wrist, she disarmed the noble instantly. The crescent relic fell from his hand, and Senna caught it. The moment her fingers wrapped around her ancestral hilt, the blade resonated with her true moonlight technique. A massive column of pure blue aura erupted into the ceiling. Humiliated, the Baron pulled a concealed laser pistol from his coat, aiming it directly at Senna's back while she was bathed in the aura. She didn't even look. Senna pivoted, executing a single, flawless, full moon slash. A razor-thin line of blue light crossed the stage, cleanly slicing the Baron's laser pistol in half before he could pull the trigger. The Baron fell to his knees in terror. The room went silent as a loud rumbling echoed from above. The entire solid rock ceiling of the auction hall slowly slid apart. Senna's single slash had cut through the entire underground vault. With Jax's debt erased and Senna's family relic reclaimed, the underspire was completely flipped upside down. The squad walked out of the ruined auction house together. It was time to return to the surface and face the executives. To get back to the tournament, they needed to bypass 100 floors of Spire security. Miho's solution was simple: hijack the Needle, the central high-speed elevator reserved exclusively for Spire executives. The golden doors shut, and the Needle shot upward at terrifying, bone-crushing speeds. For a moment, the squad could finally catch their breath as they rocketed out of the slums. The atmosphere in the squad had changed. With his neighborhood's debt erased, the heavy burden on Jax's shoulders was gone. And with her ancestral blade returned, Senna's aura was razor-sharp. But the Spire doesn't let rats ride first class. The Needle violently shuddered and slammed to a halt thousands of feet in the air. The lights cut out, replaced by spinning red emergency sirens. The reinforced glass ceiling exploded inward. Executive Vane dropped gracefully through the falling shards, his pristine white suit immaculate, the ever-present red lollipop in his mouth. "You kids are causing way too much paperwork," Vane sighed, pointing his candy at them. "I came down here to personally execute you for trespassing." Last time, Vane's mere presence froze them in fear. This time, Jax didn't even hesitate. Stepping into the executive's guard, he unleashed a full-power iron pulse right hook. Vane caught the punch with his palm. But the impact didn't just dissipate. A massive shockwave rattled the elevator car, and Vane's pristine white shoe was pushed back exactly 1 inch. He wasn't an immovable wall anymore. Before Vane could counter, a blinding blue light filled the confined space. Senna pushed off the glass wall, executing a flawless, high-speed diagonal slash with the crescent relic. Vane leaned his head back, dodging the lethal strike. But the relic's aura extended past the physical blade. A razor-thin cut opened on Vane's cheek. The invincible executive bled. Vane touched his cheek. He looked at the blood on his finger, then slowly crushed his lollipop between his teeth. He took off his white suit jacket. The playtime was officially over. Vane unleashed his full spiritual pressure. The gravity in the elevator instantly multiplied. The reinforced glass began to spiderweb. Jax, Senna, and Miho were forced violently to their knees, gasping for air. Only one person remained standing. Ryu walked right through the crushing gravity field like it was a light breeze. He slid his sleeping mask up onto his forehead, his eyes locking onto Vane. Ryu and Vane clashed. The kinetic force generated by the two monsters colliding in a confined space was too much. The entire luxury elevator violently exploded mid-air, sending them all falling down the colossal spire shaft. As they plummeted into the abyss, Miho's hacking paid off. He hijacked a Spire maintenance hover platform, catching his squad mid-air. They blasted out of the shaft and crashed directly onto the floor of the upper brackets. They crashed onto the upper brackets floor with all the subtlety of a meteor. They had made it back, but they were now trespassers in the center of the Spire's ultimate game. The dust cleared, revealing the reception committee. The remaining elite regulars of the tournament were gathered, watching the spectacle with expressions ranging from shock to pure irritation. Kira broke the silence. "I knew it," he screamed, ecstatic. "Vayne couldn't keep you down." He ignited his plasma, ready to fight at Ryu right there. "Hold your positions." Administrator Cross's voice boomed across the entire arena as a holographic barrier separated them. The administrator was done with executive chaos. Cross finalized his decision. Vayne had failed to contain them and embarrassed the organization. "We cannot ignore the entertainment value of anomalies," Cross announced, overriding Vayne's orders. "The brackets are finalized," Cross stated. "You will be reinstated, provided you win your official rounds. Failure to perform means immediate deletion." The first match was locked, Senna versus the top-tier elementalist, Mage Lord Magnus. The arena was sanitized for official combat. Floor 10 was transformed into a floating traditional courtyard, a perfect setting for the stellar edge arts. Senna stepped onto the stage, her ancestral blade humming. Mage Lord Magnus was a formidable opponent. He unleashed an elemental fury of fire and ice, aiming to incinerate or freeze the swordswoman before she could close the distance. Last time, Vayne's pressure broke her technique. This time, Senna was connected to her ancestry. Using Stellar Edge, Comet Trail, she generated a spiraling blue vortex that deflected Magnus elements with absolute, stunning efficiency. This wasn't just a fight, it was a demonstration. Senna focused, her family's moonlight technique synchronizing with the relic. It was time for the chills factor. Senna moved so fast she appeared to teleport. She executed Stellar Edge, Thousand Petal Eclipse. In a microsecond, 12 blinding crescent aura slashes simultaneously decimated Magnus' defenses and shattered his robes into dust. Magnus was out. Senna had won her first official round with overwhelming skill. The crowd sat in stunned silence, the swordswoman had officially returned to the upper brackets. Up in the spectator box, the victory didn't seem to faze Ryu. He had already found another couch and was fast asleep, ignoring the tension completely. But while the tournament continued, Pontiff Malachor was making moves. With Vayne occupied and Cross managing the public relations, the Spire cult was finally ready to retrieve the vessel. Kira smiled maniacally. Cross's intervention had delayed the inevitable, but it hadn't cancelled it. He stared at the sleeping anomaly. The hunt was far from over. The second match of the upper brackets was locked in. It was a classic mismatch, Miho, the squad's resident tactician, against Atlas, a massive, heavily armored brawler known for breaking opponents in half. The arena shifted into a complex industrial factory. To a brawler, it was just a bunch of obstacles. But to Miho, it was a playground of calculated geometry and environmental hazards. Atlas laughed as Miho stepped onto the walkway. "They sent a nerd to fight me. I'm going to snap you like a twig, kid." Atlas charged like a freight train, obliterating a steel pillar in his path. Miho didn't even look up from his tablet. He simply sidestepped by exactly 2 inches, letting the giant barrel past him. "Kinetic energy is just mass times velocity squared," Miho muttered. His glasses projected a specialized HUD, calculating Atlas's weight, speed, and the structural integrity of the factory floor. Miho reached into his cardigan and tossed 3 small, glowing yellow kinetic traps onto the metal grates. Atlas completely ignored them, pivoting to crush the tactician. Atlas triggered the traps. A sequence of directed explosions erupted. The giant laughed, crossing his heavy armored arms. The blasts didn't even dent his plate armor. Tricks don't work on absolute defense. Atlas roared, grabbing Miho by the collar and lifting him entirely off the ground. The crowd thought it was over. But Miho just pushed his glasses up his nose and smiled. "I wasn't aiming for your armor," Miho said. He tapped a final command into his tablet. The earlier explosions hadn't been meant to damage Atlas, they were perfectly calculated to destroy the structural supports of the walkway beneath him. The metal groaned, snapped, and completely collapsed under the giant's extreme weight. Atlas plunged downward into the factory's abyss, barely managing to catch a single steel beam with one hand. Miho landed gracefully on a lower pipe. Drawing a high-voltage telescoping baton, he delivered a precise, mathematically perfect strike to the only unarmored nerve cluster on the giant's wrist. The shock bypassed the armor completely. Atlas's muscles spasmed involuntarily, forcing his hand to let go of the beam. The juggernaut fell into the dark, eliminated by pure gravity and a superior IQ. Up in the stands, Jax grinned and crossed his arms. Senna nodded in deep respect. The tactician had officially secured his place in the tournament. Ryu, of course, slept through the entire thing. But the victory celebration was short-lived. High up in the control room, Administrator Cross received a fatal system error. An unauthorized breach had just occurred in Sector 4, the Spire's core. Pontiff Malachor wasn't waiting for the tournament to end. Leaving a trail of unconscious Spire guards in his wake, the cult leader was personally moving toward the arena. He was coming for the anomaly. The third match of the upper brackets finally called the anomaly to the stage. Ryu woke up from his nap, stretched his back, and lazily walked toward the arena drop zone. The arena shifted into a crumbling, overgrown ancient temple. It was the perfect hunting ground for his opponent, Garo, a notorious beast tamer from the outer wastes. Garo didn't wait for the buzzer. Roaring a battle cry, the massive hunter leaped from a stone pillar, swinging twin jagged steel axes designed to cleave through heavy armor. But Garo's axes never reached Ryu. The entire digital sky of the arena suddenly shattered like cheap glass. A sickly, glowing green toxic miasma poured through the cracks, suffocating the stadium. From the toxic clouds, Pontiff Malachor descended. The leader of the Spire cult had bypassed Administrator Cross's absolute security grid to step directly onto the tournament floor. "This is my match, interloper." Garo roared. Furious at the interruption, the hunter charged the pontiff, swinging his heavy steel axes with lethal force. Malachor didn't even turn around. He simply snapped his fingers. Garo's S-rank axes instantly decayed into green ash, the terrifying rot spreading up the hunter's arms in seconds. Garo was deleted from existence, leaving only a pile of dust on the stone floor. The arena went completely, terrifyingly silent. Malachor finally spoke. "The vessel is ready for extraction." Ryu sighed heavily, rubbing the back of his neck. "You know, I was actually looking forward to fighting the axe guy. Do you cult freaks always ruin everything?" Malachor raised his hand. Dozens of elite Spire cult assassins dropped from the toxic clouds, surrounding Ryu with glowing, poison-laced daggers. It wasn't a tournament match anymore, it was an execution. But Ryu wasn't alone. Jax crashed down from the spectator stands like a meteor. Slamming his fist into the stone, he unleashed an iron pulse shockwave that scattered the assassins. Senna landed gracefully beside him, drawing the crescent relic. With a single, blinding horizontal slash, she cleanly severed the weapons of the approaching vanguard. Miho dropped in last, his fingers flying across his tablet. He deployed a series of heavy hexagonal hardlight shields, perfectly intercepting a barrage of toxic darts aimed at their blind spots. The anomaly, the brawler, the swordswoman, and the tactician stood back to back. The tournament rules were completely broken. This was open warfare. Ryu reached up, ripping his sleeping mask off his head and tossing it to the ground. His eyes ignited with a terrifying, blinding white light. He released the limiters entirely. Let's see if your magic can calculate this. Ryu didn't wait for Malachor to cast a spell. He launched himself forward with such immense kinetic force that the solid stone floor beneath him instantly cratered, blasting the surrounding assassins into the air. With Ryu gunning for the pontiff, the squad held the line. Jax unleashed Iron Pulse, Phantom Barrage, firing a flurry of compressed air punches that shattered the cultists' magical shields like glass. Senna moved like a dancer through a minefield. When the assassins fired concentrated dark magic, she effortlessly leaped through the volley, her crescent relic slicing the pure energy beams perfectly in half. From the back line, Miho's digital HUD analyzed Malachor's defenses in real time. Ryu! Miho shouted over the comms. His absolute shield relies on continuous spatial distortion. The weak point is dead center. Ryu heard the tactician. Appearing instantly in front of the pontiff, he drove a devastating straight punch into the dead center of Malachor's spatial shield. Black and white lightning ripped through the arena. The shield cracked, but Malachor didn't flinch. "You are purely physical," Malachor chanted, raising his hands. "And physics cannot escape a singularity. Eclipse Arts, Void Sphere." Malachor summoned a localized singularity. The immense gravitational pull instantly began tearing the ancient temple apart. Massive chunks of stone and his own screaming assassins were violently sucked into the void. Jax, Senna, and Miho anchored themselves, barely holding on. But Ryu stood perfectly still. The suffocating atmospheric pressure radiating from his body violently repelled the singularity's gravitational pull. Ryu dropped into a deep stance, his eyes burning white. "Gravity is just weight," Ryu whispered. Renewal Taekwondo secret art, atmospheric dragon. The kinetic force around him condensed, taking the shape of a roaring beast. He unleashed the kick upward. It wasn't magic. It was sheer, impossibly dense air pressure forced into a singular trajectory. A colossal white wind dragon erupted from his leg, roaring as it rocketed toward the singularity. The dragon clashed with the void. The collision between absolute gravity and absolute kinetic force caused the virtual space of the arena to literally fracture like a broken mirror. The singularity shattered. The sheer recoil of the broken spell blasted Pontiff Malachor violently backward. The left half of his golden mask cracked and broke away, exposing a corrupted, glowing green eye. Malachor skidded to a halt, touching his broken mask with trembling fingers. He realized he had vastly miscalculated. The vessel wasn't dormant, it was already fully awakened. He couldn't take Ryu by force. Stepping backward into a dark portal, Malachor pointed a final, cursing finger at Ryu. "Enjoy your tournament, Anomaly. But when the spire reaches the summit, you will return to us." The portal snapped shut, clearing the toxic miasma. Immediately, Administrator Cross teleported into the center of the cratered arena. He looked around at the catastrophic damage, glaring furiously at the four-man squad. Administrator Cross was livid. Half the tournament roster was dead, the arena was shattered, and cultists had breached his absolute security. He pointed a trembling finger at the anomaly, fully prepared to execute them on the spot. But before Cross could order the execution, his terminal beeped. The broadcast of Ryu fighting the pontiff hadn't crashed the system, it had broken viewership records. The Spire's elites were pouring billions of points into the betting pools. Cross straightened his tie, his anger entirely replaced by corporate greed. "The standard brackets are void," he announced over the loudspeaker. The ruined arena digitally dissolved, replaced by a massive white marble pyramid with a golden throne at the summit. "Welcome to the Crown's trial," Cross's hologram boomed. "The rules are simple. One team sits on the throne. The rest of you attack. Any squad that can hold the throne for 5 continuous minutes advances directly to the grand finals." Before Cross even finished explaining the rules, Ryu had already teleported to the top and claimed the seat. He draped his legs over the armrest and yawned. Finally, a match where I can sit down. Down below, the remaining regulars boiled with rage. The 0-point anomaly was mocking the summit of the tower. Dozens of elite fighters immediately ignited their weapons, forming a temporary, massive alliance to dethrone him. They didn't charge up the stairs. They simply unleashed everything they had. A tidal wave of combined elemental magic and high-caliber laser fire roared up the pyramid, threatening to vaporize the throne entirely. Jax stepped onto the top stair, rolling his shoulders. He didn't dodge. Slamming both fists downward, he generated an iron pulse so dense it formed a solid, localized hurricane, violently repelling the entire bombardment. Senna used the air wall as cover. Bounding down the marble steps like a phantom, her crescent relic flared to life. A massive blue aura wave severed the vanguard's weapons before they could even reload. Miho didn't waste a second. With the vanguard disrupted, the tactician took absolute control of the battlefield's geometry, deploying a labyrinth of hardlight barricades across the lower steps. Ryu watched from the throne, resting his chin on his palm. His squad wasn't just surviving, they were dominating. Jax, Senna, and Miho were perfectly synchronized, easily holding the line against the best fighters in the Spire. But the real threat wasn't the horde. Walking out of the smoke at the base of the pyramid, Kira ignited his plasma fists. He ignored the chaotic battle around him, his crazed, burning eyes locked entirely on the throne. Kira didn't fight the vanguard. He launched himself up the massive steps like a blood-red meteor, violently shattering Miho's hardlight barricades through sheer, overwhelming brute force. Senna and Jax moved to intercept, but Ryu held up a hand, stopping them. The anomaly finally stood up from the golden throne. He cracked his knuckles, his sleepy eyes narrowing into a fierce, predatory glare. The true rival clash had finally arrived. Ryu leaped from the summit. Kira launched from the steps. The moment their ultimate strikes collided mid-air, the resulting shockwave cracked the very foundation of the pyramid. They landed on the shattered marble steps. The air between them warped and shimmered from the sheer ambient heat of their collision. There was no trash talk. The time for words was over. They moved faster than the arena's cameras could track. It wasn't a fight, it was a high-speed collision of natural disasters. Every exchange of punches and kicks pulverized the solid marble beneath them into fine white dust. Down below, the massive battle royale completely ceased. Jax, Senna, Miho, and the remaining elite fighters all stopped fighting, forced to simply watch. The shockwaves radiating from the top of the pyramid made it impossible for anyone else to interfere. Kira was pushed back, his boots carving deep trenches into the stone. He wiped a drop of blood from his lip, his smile stretching into absolute, manic euphoria. He was finally being pushed to his absolute limit. More! Kira screamed. Show me more, anomaly. He didn't hold anything back. Engaging his plasma ignition, a colossal pillar of hypercondensed red energy erupted from his core, literally burning the edges of his own uniform. Leaping into the air, Kira condensed all his burning aura into a single point. He hurled a miniature, roaring red sun directly at the anomaly. The radiant heat began melting the marble pyramid before the attack even landed. Ryu couldn't dodge, the blast radius would vaporize his squad below. He raised his arms in a crossguard, taking the miniature sun head-on. The sheer force pushed him back, scorching his hoodie and melting the soles of his sneakers. The plasma dissipated. Ryu lowered his smoking arms. The manic grin was gone, replaced by a terrifying, empty focus. He dropped his guard entirely, letting his arms hang loosely at his sides. This was the ultimate pinnacle of renewal taekwondo. No wasted movement. No telegraphed buildup. Ryu simply pivoted his front foot exactly 1 inch, creating a localized vacuum just from shifting his center of gravity. Kira dove down for the final, lethal strike. Ryu initiated the recoilless kick. There was no wind-up, no roaring aura, just a completely silent, absolutely perfect transfer of kinetic energy. In the microsecond their attacks met, Kira's eyes widened in absolute shock. He felt no resistance. His ultimate plasma drill didn't clash with Ryu's leg, it was simply bypassed and erased by the sheer perfection of the technique. The recoilless kick connected. It didn't just break Kira's ribs, the kinetic force bent the very air around them, sending a silent, devastating cone of atmospheric destruction straight through Kira's defenses. The top-seeded prodigy was defeated in a single, flawless strike. Kira fell backward through the air, completely unconscious before he even hit the ground, his plasma extinguished. Ryu landed softly, turning and casually dropping back into the glowing golden throne. Exactly 1 second later, the massive digital timer in the sky hit 0. The crown's trial was over. In the control room, Cross stared at the monitors. The 0-point anomaly hadn't just survived, he had conquered the summit. The 4-man squad had officially punched their tickets to the grand finals.